Hello and welcome to this video tutorial. Gareth here from tastytudes.com. In the last episode, we set up a 12-page brochure document. In this video, we are going to continue and I'm going to bring in all the images and textures and demonstrate how we can manage this. If you're new to this course and have not seen the previous episode, I suggest you watch this to see how this document was set up before watching this tutorial. So with the project folder open, navigate to the design process folder. In that, I'm going to open the design process PDF. So here are my ideas for the brochure and how I developed the layouts we are going to create in this video. So for the front cover and the back, I'm going to aim to get a composition like this. So on the front, the logo sits on the solid background. Across the top and bottom, we will be overlapping shapes that continue seamlessly onto the back. The logo will also be placed smaller on the back of the brochure. Now you may be wondering, why is the cover set on the right and not on the left? Well, here I am drawing the sketch how it will be printed. When this document is printed, the back and front will be printed on a single sheet of paper and folded and stapled down the middle to join the other printed spreads. As this is the front and back, this is how it will wrap around the outside of the document. For some of the inside spreads, I'm going to aim to create something similar to these, with images inside shapes. I'll use coloured strokes and attempt to position my type like so. So let's start on the first page and put in the logo. With the project folder open, navigate to the project assets folder. In that, open the branding folder and open the branding document. So here I'm going to select the logo that is set on the dark grey background. Now currently in Illustrator, this is a group of individual vector shapes that have been grouped together. With the logo selected, I'll copy, come into InDesign. Now because I'm about to paste in an image, I'll make sure the image layer is selected in the layers panel and press Command V to paste, and I'll place the logo in the center. And there it is. Now because InDesign works with vector shapes, the vectors from Illustrator will be compatible with InDesign. So the logo will carry across perfectly. Nice. I'll press W and take a look in preview mode. So currently the logo is looking a little too small on the canvas area. So with it selected, I'll place my mouse cursor over the bottom right point on the bounding box. I'll press and hold Shift and Alt and drag out a little. And I'll press W and that's looking great. But now we have a problem. If we take a look over in the swatches panel, we can see we have some new CMYK swatches here. Indeed, these are correct, but we do not want to have multiple swatches in the swatches panel. This is just going to clutter up our workflow. So how did these get there? Well, when we pasted the logo from the branding document, it carried the swatches across that were applied to it in Illustrator. Now this is easy to fix. Now bear in mind that the colours applied to the logo are currently the new CMYK swatches, and we do not want that. We need them all set to the swatches we set up earlier and what we plan to use for the rest of the document. So I'll make sure to deselect the logo first, then over in the swatch panel I'm simply going to remove the new CMYK swatches and replace them with the ones we set up earlier. So I'll start with the blue CMYK swatch. So I'll select it, right click and delete. Now upon trying to delete it, InDesign will say, hang on a second, you have design elements in the canvas area with this colour. If you delete it, you need to replace the colour. So from the defined swatch, I will select the platonic blue I wish to replace it with. Upon clicking OK, the CMYK swatch will be removed and the design element in the canvas area will now be filled with the platonic blue swatch. Very convenient. So I'll do the same for the rest of the CMYK swatches. I'll delete them and replace them with the named CMYK swatches. Soon I'll have my logo set to the correct CMYK swatches and the other CMYK swatches removed. Great. So looking at my design process, over on the cover I decided to have these coloured shapes at the top and bottom overlapping and seamlessly across the front and back. So back in InDesign, we can see the front page in preview mode, but if we press W to enter into normal mode, we can see the background colour spreads over the left, showing us the canvas area of the back page. Well, this is here because we set this up in the master page earlier. Now this is convenient. In this mode, I can see the canvas area of the back and front spread. So I'll compose the artwork across this and then simply copy the elements onto the back cover where appropriate. So I'll start with the top. Now because I'm about to create some texture, I'll make sure the texture layer is selected in the Layers panel. So with the pen tool active, I'll click a point on the outside bleed like so, and click a point on the edge of the background to the left. I'll click a point up to the top edge of the background and across to the starting point to join and make a shape. Once the shape is complete, I'll make sure the fill colour is set to Synergy Purple. So that's the first shape. I'll quickly create the next shape. So again with the pen tool, this time I'll click a point on the outside bleed at the top right corner, then across close to the edge of the cover page, then down and across to the outside right bleed, and I'll try and get it in line with the angle of the logo, then up to the starting point to join and complete the shape. Once the shape is complete, I'll make sure the fill colour is set to Synergy Purple. I'll choose the selection tool in the menu and click off to deselect. So now I have two shapes on the top. Using the same technique, I'm now going to create two shapes at the bottom. This time, however, when I create the shapes, I'll make sure the fill colour is set to Platonic Blue. Soon, I'll have four shapes like so. Now once I have all my shapes, I'm going to press and hold Shift and select them all. With them all selected, I'll right click, scroll down and choose Effects, select Transparency and set the transparency to 20% and click OK. And press W to take a look in preview mode. So here we can see the colours are overlapping nicely, but it's looking a little dark. I'll press W to enter into normal mode. So with Shift held down, I'll select the bottom right shape and the top left shape. With them both selected, I'll right click, scroll down and choose Effects, select Transparency and set the transparency to 50% and click OK. So now we have a little more dynamic there. Now before we move on, I'm going to edit these shapes a little. So I'll press A to activate the Direct Selection tool. So what I'll do here is select the edge points that make up the shapes, and with Shift held down, I'll use the arrow keys to fine tune the position and the shapes. So what I'm looking for here is the overlap of the blue shapes to be precisely in the centre. I want the angle of the shapes to reflect the logo above, and likewise with the purple shapes above. So after a little tweaking, I'll soon have something that looks like this. And I'll press W, and that's looking great. So once I'm happy with the cover, I'll proceed on to the next spread. So the first spread is going to be the index. So looking at my design process, I decided to place an image in the centre across the fold, with some thick colour around, and strokes going off in angles of the hexagon. The pattern is placed up in the left hand side and the typesetting down on the right. So back in InDesign, I'll begin with the centre hexagon. Now because I'm about to create a shape to place an image into, I'll make sure the image layer is selected in the Layers panel. So to do this is quite simple. So I'll come over to the menu, click and hold on the Shape tool and select Polygon. With that selected, I'll come and simply click once in the canvas area. On this occasion, I'm going to click in the dead centre of my document. Upon click, up will pop the Polygon menu. So in this instance, I'm going to type 100mm for the width and type 88mm for the height. For the number of sides, I'll set this to 6, and I'll make sure star inset is set to 0 and press OK. So upon click, we will get a hexagon shape. With the selection tool, I'll just drag it into the dead centre like so. So currently, this hexagon is not to the right angle. I'll place my mouse cursor next to the bottom right point, and when the mouse cursor changes to rotate, I'll press and hold Shift and drag up and snap up so it aligns like so. So now we have the shape just right. So this shape is a little small, so I'll move my mouse cursor and place on the bottom right point. I'll press and hold Shift and Alt and drag out a little to increase the size, like so. So now I'm happy with the size of the shape. Looking at my design process, I want an image to appear in the shape, but with solid colour around the outside. So back in InDesign, I'm going to set the colour of this hexagon to white, so not to get confused here. So with the shape selected, I'll press Command C to copy. I'll come up to Edit and select Paste in Place. Now this will create a copy of the hexagon shape and place it in the exact same place. So with the new shape selected, I'll set the colour to Platonic Blue. I'll place my mouse cursor over the bottom right point, press and hold Shift and Alt and scale up like so. Now this image is going to be a texture, so I'll press Command X to cut. I'll come into the Layers panel, select the texture layer, which is below the image layer. I'll come up to Edit and click Paste in Place. And now it's set behind my white hexagon shape, which is on the layer above. Now in my design process, I want half of the hexagon to be blue and half to be purple. So back in InDesign, I'm going to make a modification to the current shape. So I'll press A to activate the Direct Selection tool and click the blue shape behind. Now I can see the points on the edge that make up the shape. I'll come into the menu, click and hold on the pen tool and select the Delete Anchor Point tool. I'll come over and click on the two right points to remove them, to essentially cut the hexagon in half. So I'll choose the Selection tool, click on the shape, press and hold Alt and click and drag over to the right to duplicate the half shape. I'll come up to Object, Transform, and select Flip Horizontal. I'll make sure the shape fill colour is set to Synergy Purple in the menu, and move it over to connect with the blue shape. I'll press W to take a look in preview mode, and that's looking neat. So with the Selection tool, I'll drag my mouse over both shapes in the back. I'll right click and group. I'll press W to go back into normal mode. So now if I'm not entirely happy with the thickness of the colour around the white hexagon, I can scale this up or down. I'll place my mouse cursor over the bottom right point of the new group and press and hold Shift and Alt on the keyboard and scale up or down until I'm happy with the thickness. So now I'm going to place an image inside my white hexagon shape. So first I'll set the colour fill to Transparent. With the box area selected, I'll press Command D to place an image into it. Up will pop the folder window. So I'll navigate to the Project folder, into the My Project folder, in the Assets folder, into the PSD folder and select Building 1 Grey PSD. Upon click, the image will appear inside. Now this is an image I have created using the Monochrome effect demonstrated in a previous tutorial. In that tutorial, I demonstrated how to apply the blue and purple effect, so you may not have this one to hand. So if you don't and wish to follow along, then press Command D to insert image. Instead of navigating to the My Project folder, navigate to Finished Example, ID Works, Assets, PSD and select the Building 1 Grey from there. Easy. So now the image is inside, but it's currently at the wrong angle. Now why is this? Well, if you remember earlier, when we created the hexagon shape, we rotated it up 90 degrees, anti-clockwise. This has been applied to the image, so now we have to rotate the image inside the shape to the desired degree. So I'll press A to access the Direct Selection tool. I'll click the image inside the frame. I'll come up to Object, Transform, and select Rotate 90 degrees clockwise. And now the image is aligned correctly. So I'll place my mouse cursor over the bottom right point. With Shift and Alt held down on the keyboard, I'll click and drag out or in to resize my image inside my hexagon frame until I have a composition I am happy with. So now my first image is placed into the document, and I'll press W to take a look in preview mode. Now if you think the image is looking a little blurry, come up to View, Display Performance and click High Quality. Now, InDesign is an extremely efficient program. Soon, this document is going to be filled with multiple images. If we keep the view setting set to high quality, this may slow the computer performance down and hinder our workflow. So I always keep my display view set to typical display. The images may not look crystal clear, but I know they are correctly placed into the document. So if we now come over to the links panel, we can see we have a new link. This is a really important panel and you'll be coming here a lot in future. Now currently, I can see that this is a CMYK image, perfect for print, and the resolution is set to 300 dpi, also perfect for print. Now we made sure these images were perfect in a previous video, but sometimes you may overlook the details and import images that might be inadequate. Always pay attention to these columns so you can see you're using adequate images for your document. If you cannot see your resolution and color mode column, click the top right menu in the layers panel, click panel options, and make sure actual PPI is checked and color space is checked, and these will now be visible. Great. Now at this point, if I'm not happy with the overall size of the hexagon composition, with the selection tool, I'll drag over everything. With it all selected, I'll place my mouse cursor over the bottom right point, press and hold Shift and Alt, and drag in or out to scale the elements to touch the inside of the gutter between the column guides on each page. If I zoom in around the hexagon shape, you can see where my hexagon reaches against the column gutter like so. So now I'm happy with the image and the colour around it. I'm now going to place in my strokes. So I'll make sure my texture layer is selected. I'll select the stroke tool in the menu. I'll come across and click on the right side of the hexagon and click and drag a stroke out and across using the hexagon as a guide. I'll align the stroke along the outside edge to get the same angle and release on the outside bleed line. Upon release, I'll make sure the stroke colour is set to the Synergy Purple in the menu and the stroke size is set to 1 in the stroke panel. I'll choose the selection tool to click off the stroke and press W to see it in preview mode. So I'll zoom in to where the stroke joins the hexagon shape. If it's not looking perfect, I'll press A to activate the direct selection tool, select the stroke, click on the end point and move with the arrow keys to fine tune. Once happy, I'll use the same technique to create the other strokes. And soon, I'll end up with something that looks like this. All strokes nicely composed to the edge of the bleed lines. Nice. So looking at the final design, we can see we have the grey pattern on the top left of the design. So back in my new document, with the texture layer selected in the layers panel, I'll use the pen tool to draw a shape in the area, making sure that this also expands into the bleed area. Once I have the shape, I'll set the color fill to transparent and I'll press Command D to place an image. So I'll navigate to the project folder and navigate to the My Project folder, into the Assets folder and into the AI folder where we saved our grey pattern CMYK earlier in the course. I'll select the grey pattern CMYK and click OK. Upon click, the pattern will appear inside. Now if you are following along and you did not create the pattern earlier, then press Command D to insert the image. Instead of navigating to the My Project folder, navigate to Finished Example, ID Docs, Assets, AI and select the grey pattern CMYK from there. So we place this image into the texture layer because even though it's a linked image, it is indeed part of the texture background. So I'll press W to take a look and that's looking just fine. Now if I wish to tweak the positioning of the pattern inside the shape, I can press A to activate the direct selection tool, click on the image and scale up or down. But on this occasion, I'll just press the arrow keys to move the pattern into a better position. So I'll choose the selection tool and click off to deselect. Now, I think this pattern is looking a little too bright, so I'll right click with the shape selected, scroll down to Effects, choose Transparency and set this to 50%. And that completes the image and texture effects on this composition. So to create the brochure, I'm going to start with just the images and textures. Once I'm happy with everything in place, I'll then come back and place in the type. So now I'll move on to the next spread. So on the next spread, we are going to include some more images and more type. Looking at my design process, I decided to include another hexagon image on the left, perhaps with some solid colour coming from behind and off the page, perhaps a rectangular image on the far right, and include some strokes around it, then include the type in the space between. So back in InDesign, I'll make a start. Now, as we start to build elements in the document, we can save time by duplicating. So I'll come back to the first spread, copy the hexagon image, come to the next spread and paste. Easy. Now on this occasion, I'm going to place this shape in the dead center on the left page using the guides. Then I'll scale the shape down to touch the inside margins, like so. Once happy, I'll press A to activate the direct selection tool and click into the shape to select the image. I'll press Command D to place a new image. I'll navigate to the My Project folder, into the Assets folder, into the PSD folder and insert Building 2. Now remember, if you're new to this course and have not previously created these, simply navigate to the Finished Examples folder and find a copy of them there. So upon inserting the image, the previous image will be replaced with a new. Now that's looking a little big inside. So I'll choose the selection tool to deselect. I'll click the shape to select it again, but this time selecting the frame and not the image inside. Then I'll come up to Object, scroll down to Fitting, and click Fit Content Proportionally. This will fit the entire image inside like so. Now this will give us a good starting point to simply resize the image inside however we like. So with the Direct Selection tool, I'll click inside the shape to select the image. Press and hold Shift and Alt on the keyboard and click and drag out at the bottom right point. I'll scale up and move around with the arrow keys until I have something I'm happy with. So with the first image placed in, I'll come over to the menu and select the Rectangle Shape tool. On the right page, I'll click and drag a shape from the right center gutter guide and drag out and down along the outside bleed margin like so. I'll make sure the fill color is set to transparent and press Command D to place an image. So back in the Assets folder, this time I'll place Building 3. With the image placed inside, again come up to Object, scroll down to Fitting and click Fit Content Proportionally. I'll select the image with the Direct Selection tool and scale up to fill the frame like so. If I feel the frame could be taller, with the Selection tool, I'll click and drag on the frame box up to reveal more of the image inside. So now I have two images placed into this comp. If we quickly come across into the links panel, we can see here that this image is also 300 dpi and CMYK. Great. Now I'm going to create the texture behind. So with the texture layer selected in the Layers panel, I'll select the Pen tool, click on the top point of the hexagon image and attempt to draw a path in line like so. Then down, across and up in line, then up to connect the shape. Now chances are I'll get this wrong first time, so I'll set the color fill to the Synergy Purple. With the Direct Selection tool active, I'll click the points and fine tune them to match the angle with the hexagon photo. Soon I'll have something that looks like this. Next, I'll right click, choose Effects, click Transparency and set this to 50%. Now notice how the solid color crosses over the page number here. So to avoid this, I'm going to select both elements above by clicking and dragging over with the Selection tool, and I'll simply move them up. So now I can clearly see the page number. Perfect. So next, I'm going to set up the line strokes. So looking at my design process, I decided to place various strokes to reflect the index page and to interact with the block image. So back in InDesign, I'm going to use the same technique as demonstrated earlier. I'm going to use the Line tool to click and draw a series of strokes off the hexagon shape and around the image, connecting at the ends like so. I'll make sure that any stroke that comes off the edge of the page continues to the edge of the bleed line around the page. I'll set the stroke size to 1 and make sure that the stroke color is set to Synergy Purple. Along the way, if I'm not happy with my strokes, I'll use the Direct Selection tool to click on the endpoints and adjust them by dragging or using the arrow keys to fine-tune. Soon I'll have something that looks like this. So looking at the finished design, we can see that we also have the pattern in the top left. Throughout this document, the pattern is going to repeat and feature on each spread. So back in our document, with the texture layer selected, I'll draw a shape to fill the top left space, making sure it also fills in the bleed area. I'll make sure the fill and stroke color is set to transparent. Now I'm going to demonstrate another handy tip. What I'm about to do here is take a copy of the pattern on the first spread and place it into this shape. So I'll come back to the index spread, press A, and click to select the pattern inside the shape frame. I'll press Command C to copy. I'll come back to the next spread and be careful to select the shape frame. I'll come up to Edit and this time choose Paste Into. Upon click, the pattern will appear inside the frame. Easy. With the image placed inside, I'll press A to activate the Direct Selection tool, click into the frame and select the image and move the pattern around to get a position I am happy with. Once happy, I'll choose the Selection tool to deselect, click the frame, right-click, scroll down to Effect, choose Transparency and set this to 50%. Perfect. So that now completes the image and texture composition on this spread. So the next spread is going to be where we include some more images and more type. If we take a look at the finished design, we can see we have this interesting composition. Here we have some triangle images set on a solid purple with the pattern inside. So in the new document, I'm going to start with the background color. So on the finished design, we can see the triangle images line up perfectly with the background. So I'll start by coming over to the Polygon Shape tool. I'll make sure I have the texture layer selected in the Layers panel. In the canvas area, I'll click once. Now on this occasion, I'll type 70mm for the width and 60mm for the height. I'll set the number of sides to 3 and click OK. That will give us a nice triangle shape. So I'll drag the triangle into the dead center of the canvas area. And I'll make sure the fill is set to Synergy Purple in the menu, and the stroke is set to transparent. With it selected, I'll place my mouse cursor over the bottom right point, and I'll press and hold Shift and Alt on the keyboard and scale up to touch the bleed lines like so. Once happy, I'll come up to Object, Transform, and select Rotate 180 degrees. So I'll zoom down to where the triangle crosses off into the bleed. And I'll move the triangle left so the triangle crosses into the bleed area approximately on the fold. Great, so this creates the correct angle. So I'll press A to activate the Direct Selection tool and I'll select the shape. I'll come and click and hold on the pen tool and select the Add Anchor Point tool. Now I'll come and click on the line and add an anchor point to the shape on the left hand side. I'll press A and click on the new point and drag it down to the bottom left of the bleed line, like so. I'll click on the point at the top and drag that over to the far left. So just like that, we easily created the background shape. Now I'll right click on the shape, come down to Effects, choose Transparency and set this to 50%. So next I'm going to add the images. So just like earlier, I'll come over to the Polygon tool. Now the settings should be the same as earlier. I'll click on the Images layer in the Layers panel and click once. And click OK. And here is the new triangle shape. So I'll come up to Object, Transform and select Rotate 180 degrees. I'll make sure the fill color is set to white and the stroke set to transparent. So I'll take this new triangle and scale it down like so. Now I'll place it in such a way that the top of the triangle is lined with the center line in the canvas. Then I'll press and hold Shift and click and drag down on the bottom right point until the triangle touches the outside bleed. So now I have a triangle exactly half the height of the page. Next, I'll simply line it up with the background. Once I'm happy it's aligned, I'll change the fill color to transparent, and now I'm going to place an image inside. With the shape selected, I'll press Command D. So I'll navigate back to the Assets folder in the Project folder, and this time place in Building 5 PSD. Once placed in, I'll come up to Object, scroll down to Fitting, and select Fit Content Proportionally. Notice how the image is currently upside down. Well, this is because we rotated the triangle when we originally composed it. So with the Direct Selection tool, I'll click into the frame to select the image, come up to Transform and rotate 180 degrees. With the image still selected, I'll place my mouse over one of the corners, and with Shift and Alt held down, I'll scale up and position inside until I get a composition I'm happy with. So I'll choose the Selection tool in the menu to deselect the image inside the frame. I'll select the triangle image, copy and paste to duplicate the triangle image. So I'll move it over to the left on top of the triangle below, and I'll line it up perfect. And I may have to zoom right in order to position this correctly. Once I'm happy with the positioning, with the Direct Selection tool, I'll click to select the image in the frame and press Command D to place a new image. I'll select Building 4 this time and click OK. Now, if nothing appears in the frame, I'll come up to Object, scroll down to Fitting and choose Fit Content Proportionately, and you should see the image. So with the Direct Selection tool, I'll click into the frame to select the image. I'll place my mouse cursor over the corners, and with Shift and Alt held down, I'll scale up and position inside until I get a composition I'm happy with, and select the Selection tool to deselect. I'll press W to take a look in preview mode, and that's looking nice. So next, I want to add the pattern. So I'll make sure the texture layer is selected in the Layers panel. Just like earlier, I'll use the Pen tool to draw a shape. I'll set the fill and stroke color to transparent. I'll come into the previous spread. With the Direct Selection tool, I'll click to select the pattern and copy. I'll come back into the new spread and select the transparent shape. With the Selection tool, I'll come up to Edit and click Paste Into, and the pattern will appear. With the Direct Selection tool, I'll click the pattern and move it into a more considered place. I'll choose the Selection tool, click off and deselect the image. I'll select the image frame, right click, choose Effects, select Transparency and set this to 50%. So now we have the pattern and the image inside the spread. So the last thing to add on this spread is the strokes. So with the texture layer still selected in the Layers panel, I'll select the Line tool and draw my strokes. I'll draw one down along the triangle picture. I'll set the stroke size to 1 point and make sure the stroke color is set to the base grey. And I'll draw one more stroke coming across in line with the top of the triangle image at the bottom. If I need to fine tune the line edges, I'll use the Direct Selection tool. So that completes the image and texture composition in this page. So looking at the finished document, the next spread is very similar to the previous spread. This time, the only difference is the composition of some of the strokes, the background blue solid, and the positioning of the pattern. To create this, I used the exact same techniques as displayed earlier, though I just used different images and colour. As an example, pause the video and try and create this composition in your document, or maybe try a completely different layout. You may find it easy to copy elements from the original compositions we created together. If you cannot remember how this was done, rewind the video and follow along. Either way, try and create your own layout for this section. Use the Direct Selection tool to reposition the edges of the strokes, use the color Platonic Blue, place it in the new blue images, and place in the pattern at 50%. Soon you will have something that looks like this, or perhaps different if you tried something else. So looking at the finished document, the next spread is very similar to a previous spread with the triangles. This time, the images are placed differently, and we have a blue stroke down the side. Again, as an example, pause the video and try and create this composition in your document, or maybe try a completely different layout. You may find it easy to copy elements from the original compositions we created earlier together. If you cannot remember how this was done, rewind the video and follow along. Either way, try and create your own layout for this section. Use the colour Platonic Blue, place in the new blue images, and place in the pattern at 50% transparency. Soon you will have something that looks like this, or perhaps different if you tried something else. So that completes the last spread in the document. All that's left to do here is now compose the back cover. So let's now come back to the front cover. So earlier we composed the textures across the background space, as we can see here. So what I'll do now is select the two shapes on the left and copy them. I'll scroll down to the back page. I'll make sure the page is selected and also make sure the texture layer is selected in the layers panel. I'll come up to edit and click paste in place. Upon click, the shapes should be placed precisely where I want them. This will now line up perfectly with the cover page. So now we know that these shapes will meet seamlessly with each other when this document is exported ready for print. So I'll come back to the cover page, and this time I'll select and copy the logo. I'll scroll down to the back page. Now because the logo was originally set in the image layer, by copying it, we can see that the current active layer is the image layer. In this instance, that's cool, so I'll just paste the logo. I'll position the logo in the center, scale down, and position it sitting on top of the inside margin, like so, at the bottom. And I'll take a look in preview mode, and that's looking just fine. So that pretty much completes the image and texture composition for the entire brochure. All that's left to do now is place the copy inside. But before that, if we look closely, we can see that the page numbers apply to every page. Now, it's not common for page numbers to appear on the cover. So now I need to remove the page numbers from the cover and also the index. So to do this, I'll come back to the master page section in the pages panel. So I'll put my mouse cursor over the word master A, right click. From the menu, I'll select Duplicate Master A and click OK. So now I have a Master B. So in the Master B spread, I'll remove the page number type boxes. Then I'll double click on the cover page in the Pages panel to exit Master Pages. OK, so now in the page display in my Pages panel, I'll begin with the cover. I'll select the cover and right click. I'll come down to Apply Master and click. On the pop-up menu, I'll click on the drop down for Apply Master and choose B Master and click OK. Upon click, the new B Master page will be applied to that page. And we can see this if we look closely in the page display. And now we can no longer see the page number on the cover. Excellent. So I'll do the same for the index spread. In the page display, I'll select page 2, press and hold Shift and select 3. Right click, apply master page. I'll set the master page to B Master and click OK. And finally, I'll do the same for the back cover. Great! So only the contents pages have the numbers applied. So that's how we can manage images and design elements in our brochure. All that's left for us to do now is add the copy and format the type. In the next video, I'm going to bring in all the copy and demonstrate an effective way to format all the type. See you in the next video.